Hi there, Dr. Wolfe here, doing a quick demonstration on how to work with vectors in the R programming language. Vectors are very close to what you might see in other programming languages like arrays in many ways. So let's see how they work and let's see what we can do with them. So we're going to create a vector. I'm just going to name this as VCT in this case. So VCT test. I'm just going to give it a test name, and we're going to basically assign that variable to this. We're going to use C in parentheses, and we're going to put the elements that we want to be in this vector. So we're going to go item 1, and each one is just basically going to be separated by a comma. So we go item 2 and item 3. I'll put a little note that says create a vector here. And let's see a couple things that we can do. Let's check the size, which can come in handy later, of the vector. And what we can do is we can do print number of items in my vector. And what we can do next to do that is put our vector name VCT test, okay? And what you can do is to get the size of that is use the actual length command. So if you put in length, the length command or function inside of R is going to tell us the length of that vector, all right? Now, this, of course, is not going to work with concatenation. If you know about the R language, it does not like us unless we close our parenthesis, right? We get an error message, so we had a problem there. So let's just test that out. Does this work? If we hit run, we see our lines go we're trying to concatenate a numeric value to our text value. So that's a no-no, right? How do we handle that scenario? Well, what we can do is use paste. And if you remember paste, we can say paste that first thing and then the second and then close that parenthesis off. So we're going to print out basically pasting these two together. So let's try it again and hit run. The vector gets created. And now you see the number of items in my vector is 3. So it allows us to concatenate different types of data. Now, we know length is going to return numeric. We know our text. So if we tried to just use the print and concatenate, that failed. Here with the print and paste, we can mix data types, which is an interesting thing about the actual R language. The next thing you might ask yourself, well, how do I access an element? Accessing an element. What we saw in other programming languages or have seen is arrays are zero-based. Well, not in R. Watch what happens. If we print out our test vector and we say access item 0 here, so we access an item in our vector list or just like an array we've seen, put inside of square braces, right? So item 0. Let's go through. Let's clean up the console. Let's just run this quick. Vector is created. We see the length is 3. And now we see that this print tells us character 0. Okay, it doesn't give us an error, but doesn't give us what we'd expect because we're expecting item 1, but that's not the case because item 1 is actually in position 1. So let's go back up and run our line again. And now you see item 1 gets printed out in the console. Okay, so note that about arrays inside of or vectors inside of R is that they don't start at 0. So we can also test one other thing about this that might be good to know in the future is to see, what type of data is my array. So check the array's data type. And what we can do here is we can print out and use type of and type in our array name. And you'll see it pop up for us. And I won't redo this from the line 1 or anything, but I'm just going to print this out and hit run. And you're going to see it's a character type. So our array is a character data type for this array. All right, let's finish this up by actually doing a multi dimensional vector, okay, or name value pairs. So name value pairs in a vector. Okay, so I'm going to clear my little console down below. What would that look like? So what that would look like, and I'll save a little bit of typing and I'll paste this in and just explain it quick. I made this vector with name value pair. Same way, the name of the variable, the assignment, then using the C and the parentheses, we're saying Java is using Oracle, so that's the name value. Python is Facebook, and .NET is Microsoft. So we basically aligned up programming languages with a vendor in this little example. So what we can do now is loop through that, through the vector to show all the items. So we can create a loop in R that is a little different than what we've seen. And this little loop is cool because it basically uses keys in names in programming. So if we say for key in and we use names of our vector name, it's basically going to go through each element in this array and give us the ability to print out the values in their position. So we're going to set this variable called value equal to my vector, and it's going to be the key, which is going to be the position. Okay, as we go through this for loop, basically it's the current element that's there. And what we want to do is we want to print out the name value as pairs. So we're going to do print. We'll use paste again that you saw earlier. And we're going to say key, comma, equal sign, just for separation. Or we could use a colon there if we want. And then we're going to say value. And essentially, that's going to give us output of our name value pairs. So let's see what that looks like here. Let me go up to this new vector. We're going to start running from there. Vector gets created, and we're going to loop through it. Watch what happens. We see that our languages here get written out for our name value pairs of that actual vector. So we see that in this case, our Microsoft and our .NET got written out there. And we wonder to ourselves, well, what exactly happened when we did this, and why didn't we get our first items? Like what happened to Java and Oracle, and why didn't that all come out? So let's take a look at this a little closer and see what might have went wrong. So let's clear this completely down below. Let's clear out over here. And let's just take this from the top. I'm going to actually clear out the original code that I put in. So we're not going to use that initial vector. We're going to make sure we're clean where we have our new vector that's got our Java and Oracle, our Python and Facebook and our .NET. And we have our loop to go through them. So let's start it from the top. Run. And again, we see that the output as we go through this loop only ends with the third item, leaving us to ponder, well, why didn't we get the full actual output here? So let's take a look at this one more time. And this is where things get sometimes weird when you do some troubleshooting and you wonder to yourself, well, why doesn't my test work to as I expect? And I'm going to run this again. Go move up a line. I just took some spaces out, and we still get the same result. So it wasn't due to any odd spaces that I had here. So I'm leaving you stumped, like what went wrong? Well, we get confused sometimes when we're working between programming languages. And I think it's kind of intriguing here is that my statements here actually are not part of this for function. They're executing after the for loop is done. So we're actually at the last element, to be honest. And why is that the case? Well, in R, if you go back to my prior tutorials, for loops have curly braces at the end. And I see this sometimes if you're working with Python, we forget to indent, so we don't have our code in the proper place. But in R, we sometimes forget our curly braces because it's so close to Java. So we got to fix that problem. So let's take this from the top one last time, and let's see if this really works like we expected. Run, and look at that. Java, Oracle, Python, Facebook, .NET, Microsoft. Problem solved. A little bit of debugging goes a long way, and that's why testing is really important to the work we do. I'll leave you with one more thing. When we're using that print command and we see these quotes around our name value pairs or other variable items, we probably talked about this in a prior tutorial, but in R, you might say to yourself, well, I don't want those quotes. I want to work with them without the quotes. Another parameter off the print called quote equals false. And if we were to go back up here and run these lines one more time, you'll see is a clean name value pair with no quotes around the items. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and useful as you learn more about the R programming language. Please subscribe for future tutorials. Please comment below with questions. Feel free to reach out. Look forward to the conversation. Thank you.